I'm here to give an example of how to complete the cuff portion on dress C, Simplicity Costumes S9632. In order to follow along, you should buy this pattern so that you will know the exact measurements and sizes. I just feel that this tutorial will be helpful if you want to make this because it took me a long time to figure out. So on the directions, we are on costume C, step number 8, where we are making the cuffs. For each cuff, you're right, this will be our left cuff. So for each cuff, you're going to have 2 pieces of fabric. You're going to have one piece of fabric with no interfacing, and you're going to have a second piece of fabric with interfacing. So we are going to first take our interfaced fabric. We are going to fold in half, matching up the tabs. And we're going to sew at 5/8 inch, which is standard sewing measurements on clothes. Okay, so we have sewn 5/8 of an inch on the cuff, matching the tabs. The next step was to iron down the seam so it's flat, and then to turn this over at 5/8 of an inch. This side that we're turning over is the side that has the tab as well. This side over here does not have a tab. It does say to trim down. I don't like to trim down at this point just in case I messed up. I like to keep it the size it's at currently, and then I'll trim it later. So after we've completed this, we set the interface portion to the side, and we now take the unlined portion. We're going to do the same thing by matching the tabs right here and sewing 5/8 of an inch and then pressing down with an iron to open it. So we've taken the unlined portion, we've sewn it, we've pressed it. So now we have to fit this inside of our lined portion, but they need to be right sides together. So you take this, turn it inside out, matching seam to seam, you stick it inside. What direction? The direction does matter. You're going to look for this tab, and it should also line up with the folded over portion of the tab. And then we're going to pin it. So we went ahead and put the lined portion inside of the interface portion. I did it on the side that did not have the tabs. And remember, this is folded over, and then this section is not folded over. So the next step, oh yeah, and it's also lined up here. So the next step is to sew this entire top portion at 5/8 of an inch. So this is now sewn up at 5/8 of an inch. The directions say you can trim this portion. I personally like to serge it down. Okay, I've serged it and trimmed it. So the next portion, you just want to double check. You're going to pull the inside unlined section out. Oh, see, I got that caught. That should be flat, but that's not that big of a deal. But try not to do that on your own. So you're going to press this down so it's flat, and you want to just double check that your tabs are in the same area and that the center seams are lined up. You can't really see, but they are lined up. Okay, so I actually moved this seam. This is how it was. I actually moved the seam inside so that it was near the interfacing portion. I'm going to do an over seam right here. So you sew as close as you can to this line all the way around, so that when this ultimately is pulled inside out and it's your cuff, this would be what your cuff would look like. There will be a small seam right here that keeps this portion of fabric to this side of the cuff. I misspoke. This is actually called an understitch, is what we just did. So at this point, you turn it right side out, and you can see my understitch right there. And what that does, again, is to keep the heavy portion on the heavy side, so that when you're wearing your cuff, it will actually lay like this is the outside portion of it, and you don't see the stitch at all. that is what an understitch is. So for the next section, you're gonna make sure it is right side out and press it, give it a good press. We are going to put it inside the sleeve. Okay, we have our sleeve. Our sleeve is currently, this is the part of the arm that goes up by the shoulder, and this is the part down by the hand. Our sleeve is currently inside out, so this is the wrong side of the fabric, and this is the right side of the fabric. We are going to take our cuff that is turned with the right side of the fabric out, the wrong side of the fabric in, because we want the two right sides to be next to each other. So we're going to push this inside the sleeve with this portion that is not folded over, because remember this portion's folded over. The portion without the lining that's not folded over is going to be at the edge right here. You need to match up the seams, this seam to this seam, and then you need to match up the dart to exactly halfway over here where the other dart is. So let's stick this inside. So we have this all lined up. As you can see, this is my seam to seam, and you really want to make sure you're lining up the actual seam, which is right there, not this portion, to the center of this line. This happens to just not all be on the same side. This is open. And then we also want to line up the darts on the other side. One of the tricks I like to do, this fabric is a little stretchy. You want to do the two outside ones, so you're going to put this dart in or this pin in, and then this. And then what I like to do is kind of pull it taut like that. And then I put a center one, and then I will pull it taut again, and then I put a center one, so that all of the fabric, because it will bunch a little bit, but even when you sew, you want it to be tight because of the type of fabric this is. I have lining fabric, and then I have a sheer fabric. So that's how I do it. So the next step will be to sew this at 5/8 of an inch again, and then I'm going to finish it off with a serge. And as a reminder, this is just the cuff portion that has no interfacing. The interface, it's like the cuff with no interfacing, and then the cuff with the interfacing is inside of here. Okay, so I went ahead and sewed it at 5/8 of an inch. And then I serged it, and what you will do is you could pull it out. And just to give you an idea of what's happening here. So you have your line from your sleeve going onto your cuff. What's going to happen is you're going to fold this over, and then we're going to do another stitch right here. We're going to turn this inside out, and we're going to do a stitch here that will keep this fabric locked down. And because we folded it over, it's going to have a nice finish to it and not raw edges. At this point, I would press this to find out exactly where everything is going to lay. So you're going to press this down. You kind of want to fold this potentially a little bit closer to the line on the inside, because when I am going to sew it, I am going to sew it right here in the ditch or just above, and you do want it to be as close as possible on this side. Okay, I went ahead and pressed this top portion and kind of adjusted my seam so that when this folded lined piece comes, and I'm stitching it from the other side, we'll be just catching it here. So with our sleeve, this is the inside. We're now going to turn it to the correct side out. And then I'm going to go ahead and pin it so I can double check how it's lined up. Okay, I pinned it. You want to again confirm your everything is kind of lined up, and this is the best place to look, is your seam from your sleeve goes right into your cuff. There's two places you can stitch. You can stitch in the ditch, which is right here between the two pieces of fabric, or you can stitch just to the left of that on the black. That's what I did with the other sleeve, so that's where I'm going to stitch, just a fraction to the left side of the stitch. When I'm stitching, it's catching the back side of this cuff so that you have a nice finished edge on the inside of your sleeve. I'm going to go ahead and stitch that. So I just finished stitching that line. This is how it all lines up. So this is now, you can tell that it caught the inside, so it's a finished seam and it looks nice. I could have probably done this better, but it's the inside of my sleeve. I'm not too bothered. But you have a nice finished interior. Look at it, looks so professional. So when you put this sleeve on the dress, I've been folding it up and it kind of lays like that. So there you go. You have your cuff. Very cute.